thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming this afternoon. And thank you so much, Carol Stern, for being here with us today. We, as some of you know, we usually have a dinner after this and invite some of the visitors, participants in this session. But Carol can't stay for the dinner tonight because she's got to go to the 94th birthday celebration of her mother, which is assembling all of their relatives in New York. I think it's some 30 people, 30 people coming from all over the world for this celebration. So we gave her a pass on the dinner tonight, but in return, she's agreed to come back and visit and meet some of the people here at Duke whom she has not had a chance to meet. And so that's the plan. Any event, so Carol is really fascinating career. You know her because she has been the president of the Walton Family Foundation. But before doing that, she was a graduate of the State University of New York at Oneonta University. She has been really the number 2 person at the Anti-Defamation League. It's one of the leading organizations in the field trying to deal with the problems of anti-Semitism and also discrimination about everybody else as well. And she was really the number 2 person to the long time, for 18 years, I think, a long time, very highly regarded head of the ADL. And then she moved over to become the head of the U.S. Fund for UNICEF, where she got a lot of experience dealing with problems of children around the world. As you know, UNICEF is the United Nations agency for worrying about the problems of children. And right before the onset of COVID, she was recruited to go down to become the president of the Walton Family Foundation, which is a very interesting foundation. She's going to tell you more about it. It's interesting for a lot of reasons. There are a number of members of the family. There's one central foundation, but a lot of the members have their own foundations. And part of her job has been to try to develop collaborative efforts between the general overall foundation and the philanthropic interest of members of the family, and now 3 generations. 3 or 4?
There's 3. Well, there are 4, but 3 active.
3 active. And what's interesting about that family foundation that I found when Carol told me that every member of the family can come to the meetings if they want to. And that's some 27 people, did you say?
Yeah, 27 of each, yeah.
27 are eligible to come to the meetings. So you never know who's going to show up, in fact, right?
For sure.
So in any event, the Walton Foundation has done a lot of really interesting things in a number of areas some of you all talked about being involved with. So I'm going to turn it over to Carol right now and ask her to give us, we originally had a 3-minute video to show that she had recorded, but unfortunately the machine in here is not working today, and so we can't show it. So she's going to do it in person, rather. So Carol.
So for those of you old enough to remember Shecky Green, he used to have the clicker and say, this is what the picture is. That's me today. First of all, before I even get into it, it was really fun, and thank you for introducing yourselves, because I felt like my career path went around the table. I am a former dean of students. I spent at Polytechnic University. I spent more of my years of UNICEF in Ethiopia and Kenya than probably any other countries. And obviously the issues of maternal and neonatal health and early childhood education are near and dear to me after 14 years running UNICEF. So kind of fun to just hear what everybody's doing. The Walton Family Foundation is a family foundation started by Sam and Helen. And actually, Joel and I had dinner together last night, and I was sharing with him, we recently did a Founder's Intent video. Now, Sam and Helen are long gone, and for those of you who are talking about newer and younger foundations, I encourage you to do a Founder's Intent video before the founders are gone. I was brought in because they are transitioning from the 2nd generation to the 3rd, and that really was what I committed to come for 3 to 5 years to help make that a positive experience. But the 1st generation is gone. And so when I first came and I asked, what is the foundation? Why do we exist? I was told, well, we exist for our 3 programs. We do K-12 education all over the country. We believe strongly in the right for families to find the right education for their child, and not every child learns the same way. And we believe in access to opportunity for all people. So that was 1. 2, the family has long history and still steeped in their love of nature. And our second area of funding is really about the environment, but exclusively climate change and water. And in particular, right now, great emphasis on ag practices that will change the way water is used and change the way our soil holds water. Really interesting research. And frankly, I came to the foundation with no background in environmental studies. And so for me, I feel like my 3 years to date have been my master's in environmental studies. I've learned more from farmers than I ever thought I could learn at this stage in my career and life. And then finally, our home region of Bentonville and the Delta. And I know someone referenced the Delta. So, which again, I am a born and bred New Yorker. So the Delta has been a really wonderful experience for me. I've learned a lot. I thought that I understood poverty in this country when I went to work for UNICEF and spent my, 14 years in 45 countries dealing with poverty, only to come home and to realize there was a lot more going on here than I ever realized. So that in a nutshell is the foundation. There are 27 adults. There is a 5-member board, but anyone, as you heard, can come to the meetings and participate. It's just the members of the board have to be there. The others can. We set our strategy every 5 years. We are a strategic philanthropy, and the 5-year strategy has to be approved by all 27 family members. So that was my first year on the job. I said to Joel last night, it was easier to work for the United Nations than my first year on the job, getting 27 family members to agree, because at least at the UN you can predict the way countries will vote. But it was a great learning experience. They are truly, and not because they signed my paycheck, they are an amazing family. I have really encountered very few people in all the places I've worked around the world that I am in as much awe of as I am of the Walton family. What you see is what you get. They drive the same pickup truck I do. They are in town all the time. They are not people who just show up at the meeting. They do their homework. They are experts in the topics that they fund, and they challenge our professional team every day on what we recommend, and they are actively engaged in every step of what we do. So it's really a privilege to work for them.
I guarantee there'll be, any of you who had any experience with people who've worked at family foundations will know that is a glowing report that you'll never hear from anybody else, frankly. I mean, more sad stories coming out of family foundations in their ability to get together with one another and get something agreed to. And here is a foundation where you've heard testimony about someone who's working for 27 people and loves everybody and is loved in return. It really is an extraordinary story. So I'm going to start, as Carol has talked a little bit about what they've been doing. I was struck by their focus on the local area. I mean, where they're dealing with tangible, real problems locally. The third of the 3 major points that she was making. Say a word about you. You told Damon and me about some of the things you've done with transportation, with facilitating farmers getting their product to work, to all those kinds of things.
Sure. And just to finish one thought, though, as I said, when I came, I was told here are 3 areas of funding. But in our founder's intent, and in going through all of Sam and Helen's papers, they founded the foundation not for any one of those reasons. They founded the foundation to bring the family together to do good. And it has changed the way we work, so that the strategic plan that we passed for now, the one we're operating now, is based on, is that something that will bring the family together to do good? Not, will that reach an environment goal, a K-12 goal, or a local goal? And so that's one of the reasons I encourage you to take the time to have the discussions on the values on which you operate under, the reasons that you bring the family together, why you have a foundation, and capture it for future generations, because it literally changed the way we do work. In terms of the local, though, to answer Joel's question, the Waltons had obviously a business imperative to build Bentonville. It is the home of Walmart. If you want to attract talent, you've got to have a place talent wants to live. And that was the initial investment. It went on from that to not only do you want to make sure it's a place that has culture, thus the museums that the Walton family has built there, Crystal Bridges is magnificent, but also that it has other forms of opportunities. And so we have built an extreme myriad of trails. Both Tom and Stuart Walton and several other Waltons, Jim even, who is Generation 2, are avid bikers and dirt bikers, and they have made Bentonville a dirt biking capital of America. We have 35 miles of trails that connect the entire northwest corridor of towns. But part of their thinking when they did that was not only the recreational purpose, but there is no public transportation in northwest Arkansas. Unfortunately, the price and cost of living in Bentonville exceeds the surrounding areas, while the work opportunities are in Bentonville. So by building the bike trails, it provided a means of access to jobs. It meant that communities could get from where they live to where they want to be. But they went one step further, and when they built the trails, they built them so they go along all of the medical facilities. You can get to a hospital on a bike. You can get to a clinic on a bike. You can get to psychosocial support on a bike. And so it has helped with transportation, it has helped with economic development, and it has helped and changed the healthcare statistics. So it's really pretty exciting what they're building. The two other things they've put in is a land bank, which is capturing land to ensure that we remain green and that there will always be parks and recreation as well as development in the community. And that and the second one is this food hub, which is the one I'm most excited about. The food hub, that we have a number of industrial farms in Arkansas, but in the Northwest Corridor, you have a lot of small farms, and in the Delta, you definitely have small farms, predominantly owned by Black farmers who got the land at great price at certain points in our history. And they are not size and scope that they can afford the deep increase in the trucking and in the preparation of their product. So they're competing with these large industrial farmers, and we all know what the price of fuel has been this year. So just getting your product to market became really difficult. We created a food hub so that there is a place for all the small farmers to collectively bring their produce. It gets washed there, it gets prepared there, it gets packaged there, it gets labels of the individual farms. It has its own trucks. J.B. Hunt is also located in the Bentonville area. So we have our own trucks for the food hub, and now we have local restaurants and local grocery stores getting their produce from the local hub. It's cheaper for them. They're not paying what it costs to ship it out to California, get it back. And everyone is benefiting from this hub. It's a fascinating project, and that's about a year old right now. So that's our home region work.
Well, I've cited that in large part because it's rare for foundations to do that kind of stuff locally. Really practical problems faced by local populations. And foundations typically don't do that. Sorry. Cassie has to remind me to do a lot of things, including holding the microphone where it's up there. So, Damon, I don't know whether any of the kinds of things that you know about around here have been dealt with in a comprehensive way, like what they're doing in you said you wanted to go down and visit.
Yeah, and I don't know, Lori might be better poised to ask this question. One of the challenges we have here is we are three markets muddled into one market. And one of the things that you don't have in Bentonville is that dynamic. You've got different cities, of course, but it seems like you've got a more central, cohesive vibe to work with than we might here. Would that be true?
Yes and no. I think we've created that vibe. Not we, Carol, by any means, but we, the Walton family, has created that vibe alongside of, it is headquarters for Tyson, one town over. So Tyson family and the Walton family and the Hunt family together have invested in the community. And I think historically there were three very independent projects happening, and the second generation brought them a little bit closer, and the third generation, they are working really unified. I think that has brought the community together in many ways. We are not at all, though, a monolithic community. I'll be honest, when I moved out to Bentonville, my first question when I interviewed is, can a New York Jewish girl live here? Okay. And the rabbi came to see me. They made sure the rabbi came to see me while I was out there. And I said to him, so do you run a Reform congregation? Do you run Orthodox or conservative? And he said, nope, there's a fourth kind. And I said, Reconstruction? He said, no, the only shul in town. But there are, there are 2 Hindu temples in town, fully packed. There is a very large immigrant population in the town of Bentonville. There is a large Hispanic population in the town of Bentonville. I mean, it is a highly diverse town because the corporations have brought in, and then also because the housing in the outer areas is reasonable, the cost of living. So it has attracted, and then there's historical as well. So it's not monolithic at all. And yet there is a vibe similar to Austin, Texas, of we're in this together, we're going to build this town together, and whatever gets built, everybody benefits from. So, there's an ice skating rink in town, and it's free, and everybody can skate. And then they take turns, the different restaurants, they serve free hot chocolate on the weekends. They, the things that go on in town just amaze me again, because I'm from New York, and I don't believe anything. So, I have been awed by just the sense of community that does exist now, but I can't tell you what it was like 10 years ago. I don't think it was there.
Well, to change the subject just a little bit, during most of your prior career, before going to Walton, you were raising money for organizations, whether it was the ADL or whether it was children's work. What made you decide to go into philanthropy? Was this trying to broaden your experience with the whole field of fundraising, or what?
It's a great question. So my entire career has been in the helping professions, and that I attribute to my mom. My mom is a Holocaust survivor. She came to this country at the age of 7 and was raised in an orphanage on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and felt blessed that she survived, and speaks frequently about the nuns who cared for her and the fact that people cared, that she had a place. She's a proud American. She feels very lucky to live in this country, having experienced what she did as a child. My grandfather was on the SS St. Louis, the Voyage of the Damned, the boat that wasn't allowed to dock anywhere. And he was one of very few who did survive, so I knew my grandfather. Unfortunately, he and my mother were separated for many years, though. And I grew up with 2 stories. My mother, how lucky are we? My grandfather, here's what happened when no one gives a damn. My entire generation is in the helping professions in our family because I don't think we had any choice. We always teased my mom, as soon as she could hold a sign, she put one in it. And we marched on everything. We were out there. She said, you will use your voice because if you don't, someone else's voice will be heard. And that's been my career. And my decision to go to the Waltons had a selfish motivation. One, I loved the idea that I would be challenged to learn the environment stuff, that I was going to get a chance. Everything else had been kind of children and K-12 centric. And so just the opportunity, I went there as my 62nd birthday present to myself 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago now. And it was continuous learning. That was the selfish motivation, as well as just the hoot of leaving New York to go to Arkansas. I have to say, having an Arkansas driver's license is really fun. People say, I've never seen one of those every time I go to the airport. But the other motivation is I believe that philanthropy can influence almost more than nonprofits can. Nonprofits, and I still think of myself in that eye, we do the work, but we can't do the work without the philanthropic sector. And philanthropic sector holds the power to get the influence that enables our work. And I thought, if I can go to the other side of the desk, maybe I can finally see some of the goals I've been working my whole career towards. I told Joe last night, I think the biggest irony was I thought the one thing I won't miss is fundraising, and it's probably the thing other than children that I miss the most. That actually, for those of you, the development professionals in the room, there's something really satisfying when you say, I've got an idea you might want to fund, and the person actually says yes. And I don't have to do that anymore. Now I have to say no more often than I say yes to anything. So I do miss that.
Well, and there are many opportunities. You can now move back to philanthropy, move back to doing things in the field other than with being with the foundation. Lots of opportunities. So tell us a little bit about what is the program in natural resources. You said primary water, and say a little bit more about that. I'm sure some of the people in the room are keenly interested in environmental problems.
Sure. So our program is all about protecting rivers and oceans. We work on the Colorado River and the Mississippi, and in particular, more heavily actually initially in the Colorado and have moved more towards the Mississippi now. And really looking at now, the current emphasis is on how do we get farmers to change their practices in a way that allow for regenerative soil, in a way that will allow the soil to hold water and not waste water, because more water is used in agriculture than any other purpose in this country. And how do we build a movement ultimately of consumers who will say, I'll buy that tomato because that farmer is doing good ag practices, as opposed to that tomato and that farmer is not. And I have seen in my work at UNICEF where we changed the rug industry, where you will buy that rug because the supply chain tells you that that rug was not done with child slave labor over that rug. So it's doable. It's just how do we do it? And at the same time, how do we get farmers to adopt those practices before the movement when in fact their measurement is yield and I'm asking them give up square footage to put prairie strips in? So it's a really kind of interesting push and shove and back and forth as we do this together. The philosophy of the foundation in our current strat plan is that we look, we listen, we learn, and we lead together. That's our narrative. So that we went from being a funder to a partner with our grantees, and we sit at the table and we have those discussions. We also changed how we measure our work. And, it's kind of a little off topic, but we used to measure historically the way all foundations did. You come to me and say, I want $1 million to do 10 programs. I promise you 75 people or more will come to all 10 programs. I promise you on the evaluation of my 10 programs, 90% will rate us at 9 or better, all of those metrics. And I look at that as the person who used to fill those out and say, I know they're bullshit. Okay? So we have revamped our entire evaluation system to, we sit with you at the table. Tell me what you're trying to achieve. I don't care how many programs you're going to do. I don't care if 3 people come if you can reach the objective. And we are trying now a series of tests. We haven't solved the problem yet of how we measure the impact as opposed to count the numbers. And in some of our work, that's easier said than done. You can see our kids thriving in a school much more readily than you can see is the soil getting better because of our efforts, but we're working on it. The other part of the environment program, just so I don't forget to answer it, is our oceans work, which is really about fisheries and getting people to fish within the ratio that keeps the ocean healthy. So regenerative fishing as well.
The Duke has just announced a major university-wide initiative in climate.
That's great.
And I think it's fair to say that they have not clarified what's going to happen in the context of this initiative. So what would you throw out? Think about it. It's a great university, lots of different professions, lots of different academic departments, a lot of enthusiastic students who want to do things about it. What would you make your 2 or 3 main objectives of that university-wide program? They've even said that the goal is to have every student at Duke take a course dealing with the environment. Not necessarily the same course, but a course depending on departments, depending on the strengths, but some course in dealing with climate problems.
Well, I think that would be a great start because I came to this job at 62 years old knowing nothing about the environment work. I had never had a course in the environment. And so I do think if the university required that, if we don't sustain the health of our planet, we don't really have to worry about sustaining the health of ourselves. And so it would make sense to me to save our planet. So that would be the first. Then you can look at it from so many different ways. You know, how carbon neutral is the university? I have no idea. You can look at your ESG investments and see what the impact that your dollars are having, which is probably a lot more controversial than I think you're thinking. But I think also to do the research not only on the technical aspects of what do we need to change in the soil, or what is this safe or that safe, but also on the how do you bring the public along and make this an imperative. You know, again, for those of us old enough in the room to remember when we all smoked, it took a public outcry to change that. And I believe the environment movement has not yet reached the public outcry.
Good ideas. What?
Excuse me? Streets, right. Put the sign in the hands, right. Exactly.
Right. Well, so that's Duke is going to be focusing on that as one of the major focuses for the students in the coming years. So it takes a lot of course development to try to figure out how to deal with it. And faculty, you know, are slow to change like everybody else. But getting it, the university's made it clear that they want to do something, and figuring out how to implement it is there. So as you think about philanthropy, you're experiencing now 3-4 years of responsibility for a major foundation. Take also, before we get off the subject matter of that foundation, say a few words about the educational program that's one of the 3 major programs of the foundation. So I know that you're dealing with a variety of different kinds of problems in education.
Yeah, I mean, historically, we were the big push behind the charter school movement.
Schools, right.
We were. We continue to be great supporters of the charter school movement, but not exclusively to the charter school movement. You know, we created what we call the Building Equity Initiative, which has enabled 280,000 kids now to access a charter school by our getting the schools access to the facilities they need to create those schools. So, you know, we are doing, we've broadened our mandate. We are not, I'll tell you what we're not, because it's easier to do it that way. We're not the curriculum builders. We leave the curriculum building to the institutions. That's not our we don't fund that. That's not our expertise. However, COVID showed us the problems in education under the spotlight. These were not new problems. They were always there, but suddenly the world paid attention, and it's like a window opened up, and we said, if we don't capitalize on this moment where there's really an appetite to reinvent what American schools are, then we're going to miss the opportunity of a lifetime. So we convened a lot of research. We convened a lot of discussion groups. We sat with a lot of moms and dads, as well as a lot of students, and have reconceptualized, first of all, our thinking from a school day to a learning day. The idea that learning starts when you wake up and it ends when you go to sleep, and it's not just about what happens between 8 and 3. So that was a big change for us because we were very 8 and 3 focused. Secondly, we saw the psychosocial impact of COVID and said we have to pay attention to the psychosocial support of our nation's children. And so we're doing a lot of build out right now in that area. And then thirdly, we addressed very heavily financially the digital divide during the COVID period. And now also looking at how do we train teachers again, because the teachers teaching today were not trained to teach remotely. That was not a part of their curriculum when they were taught. And now we're having an expectation. There is no longer, you know, a snow day in New York. You know, if you can't get to school, the teacher's going to teach from home. And yet he or she has not been prepared for that. And the curriculum materials they're using are not designed for that purpose. They're designed for an in-class experience. So we are looking at, again, not the content of the curriculum, but the manner in which it's delivered and how we train the best teachers.
We talked last night at dinner about the need for education in civics, and that is in being a citizen, and the fact that most of the high schools do not have courses in civics at this point. That's a total change from 25 years ago, when all the high schools had it. And you can ask yourself the question: is the disarray that we're experiencing and the divisiveness up among everybody, not just politicians, is any indication that people don't understand what responsibility as a citizen is, or have any understanding of the country that they're living in. Is that something that you all would think about doing something about?
Potentially, yes. I mean, I think we are greatly concerned about the divide in our nation. We are actually very actively engaged in in redefining collaboration. Historically, in this country, collaboration has meant you find people with whom you have common ground, and you work together. Well, that's been great because it's built your camp. But what it has also done is divided you from the other camp because they didn't have common ground to start with. And we do believe that the divisiveness in the nation is the net result of common ground. So we are actually redefining collaboration to say we're not going to seek common ground. We want to sit at the table with the people we do not agree with, and instead to seek common solutions. That we have problems we can agree exist, and we can probably find some things we can agree to. And the example we were talking about over dinner last night, and this is not a Carol Stern idea. This is a Tim Shriver idea, actually, who's a dear friend, and Tim has been working on this with me. He said, you take the violence in our communities, and every town is fighting over the issue of gun control. And that's what they're doing in their meetings. Should we have gun control? Should we not have gun control? What kind of gun laws do we want? And those who believe in gun control are coming with all of their statistics of places that have gun control that have lower violence records. And those that do not believe in gun control are coming to the meetings with statistics about all the places that do not have gun control and have lower violence statistics. And we all can agree that guns are a problem, but we can't agree how much control we should have. What we really want to do is solve the violence in our school. That's what we want to solve. And if we can come to the meeting with, you know what, let's just put the gun control question over here for now. And let's talk about common solutions that we can agree on that will impact the level of violence in our schools. And it is, again, inverting how we think about problems. So right now we're doing research. I don't have an answer for you, but on what does it take then to make that work? That's the research we're engaged in right now. We're testing different models, but we are intentionally bringing to the table people who are opposed to charter schools to sit down with us. We are intentionally taking climate change deniers, and asking them to come and meet with us. We are intentionally sitting down with some people in our community who are more fearful of the inclusiveness that we are asking for, and trying to learn why. And so it is about bringing people together. And the one thing that I believe philanthropy has that no other sector has is the convening power. We have the ability to bring people to the table, and we have to exercise that.
Very good point. I mentioned along this same line, there's a North Carolina Leadership Forum run here by the Sanford School, which brought together 40 leaders of North Carolina, prominent individuals, 20 of them from the right, 20 of them from the left. And I mean the real right and the real left. And tasks them with the goal of coming up with some solutions. And they picked problems to work on together. And lo and behold, they did in fact manage to get agreement. And we almost, actually, as I mentioned to last night as well, that one of the things that has grown out of that was the agreement by Republicans and Democrats to do something about the districting in the courts, and to come to agreement that we needed a different system. Almost passed the legislature. It didn't, but this time. But there'll be a next time, because the base is there, is thinking about that question. So we've talked about the education work. We've talked about the oceans and environmental work. We've talked about the local work. What did you enjoy most about working at that foundation? You said you really love the people. They love you. How would you describe that that environment there in the terms of how you came to derive great satisfaction out of it?
think what's been really exciting is when I arrived at the foundation, as I said, we've had a generational shift. That was what I was hired to help. And our foundation was really three foundations: an environment foundation, a K-12 foundation, and a local support foundation. So the challenge was, how do I create a culture of one foundation? And we came up with the idea of creating some shared goals. We have three shared goals. One is about DE&I. Okay, one of the things that I will say about the recent years, and some of you will not probably agree with my statement, but in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, a lot of nonprofits that didn't do DEI work suddenly took it on. And on the one hand, that's great. People woke up, people got excited, people said things have to change. But a lot of them did not have the expertise to do the work they were now asking for funding to do. And I sat with my team and I said, look, we are not a social justice foundation. That's not who we are. I don't have, people sitting in their offices who I feel have the depth of knowledge to tell a community what to do in this area. So we're not going to do that. We're not going to suddenly pivot. What we are going to do is look at how do we use our work to further the civil rights agenda in this country. So, for example, we looked at the Colorado River and the droughts that take place in the Colorado River Basin, and we recognized the tribes were not at the table. We have a seat at the table. Let's give our seat up and give it to the tribe. Then they said, well, you can both come. Well, we have a microphone. They don't. Let's pass our microphone. It is a matter of making sure, and actually what's it called? There was a treaty, and it's the first time all states along the Colorado signed a joint treaty with Mexico for the drought resiliency plan. That's what it's called. It actually would not have happened without the tribes at the table, because the tribes had to give something up to make it happen, but they also got something back. So we used our work in that way, as opposed to trying to be what we're not. So one was about DE&I, and we hired a young woman. Her name is Tanya Odom, and we hired her to teach our program directors how to look at our processes and see, is there a DEI opportunity in it? So she's not a head counter. She's not looking at my, statistics to see how many of my staff are something. She is there truly with a deep knowledge and history in the work of civil rights and human rights, and helping us to use our work to further the agenda. So that was one shared goal. A second was, for every dollar we spend, we want to leverage. And that leverage historically has been thought of, if we partnered, it was matching funds. And instead we define leverage as either a dollar's worth of learning or a matched dollar. So putting a partner at the table, we are a very large foundation. We give away $600 million a year. And so we have historically gone alone to the work we've done. And that was a big change in this current strat plan is we don't have the answers. We're not going to have the answers sitting here in our offices. And so we have flipped it, and that's where the redefinition of collaboration came into play. And then the third one is that we are strong believers in the solutions to problems are best found by those closest to the problem. So we are community driven in our work. And that meant K-12 was doing it this way, and the environment was doing it that way, and home region was doing it that way. And now they come together and they talk about that. And my staff is held accountable not only to the goals of their program, but to their ability to promote the shared goals as well and to achieve them. And that's in their evaluations, and it has changed how we work.
So we reached the point in the program where we always now open the floor to questions and comments. We try to save about 30 minutes of the discussion. So the floor is now open. Raise your hand if you have any questions, and we'll go around the room, whatever.
All right. Do I need the mic?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Carol. This is really great. I'm curious with the next generation and the third generation, and just curious what you're seeing about their curiosities and interest in learning about philanthropy and the work, and what you all do at the foundation to kind of help them on that journey, and what that will lead for them in terms of thinking about their individual role and how they can contribute more than just ushering the family's resources.
It's again, not fully baked yet. As a matter of fact, just today I read the National Council for Family Philanthropy's Next Gen recommendations because I'm still trying to bake it. But we did a couple things. First of all, when I took over as the executive director, Annie Peretti took over as the chair of the foundation. So she is the third generation. So we got to grow up together. You know, I had a lot to learn. She had a lot to learn. And I think that was really healthy for both of us. And she has definitely found her footing. It's why I have said to them, I have done my job. I am leaving at the end of this year. So, but that in and of itself was really exciting because there wasn't anyone saying we couldn't do anything. We could do anything. And so rather than be terrified, that's the attitude we took. Like, wow, you know, there isn't anybody sitting over us. What do you want to do? And so we went out, we talked to a lot of other foundations, and we learned a lot. We are now looking at the kids. So kids for us is there's a newborn a couple weeks ago, all the way up to 21. And the fourth generation is big. We're going to be really big in a couple of years. But and we're thinking about what we can do. And a couple of things I saw in other foundations, some of them have legacy things. So when you get to be 10 years old, you get to go on the family trip too. And when you get to be 15, you get to go on this. And the kids actually work towards the opportunity to do that. And I really think that's the enticement. So that's the, you know, make it bright enough that you want to get attracted to it. Then there's the father and mother push, who are telling your kids, well, aren't you lucky you've been born into wealth? You really should give back. And that's equally important. But we found for our family, may not be true for anyone else's, setting up some really formal curricular learning wasn't doing it. The kids were bored. So we are about to try next year a fund where every child will get to fund something individually in their community because we want them to see it, small funds. And then they have to come together as a group of cousins to do one grant collectively. Now, some of the little kids may not be as actively engaged in that conversation, but we want them to experience what the third generation and the second generation have. They have that, why Sam and Helen created the foundation. They want to come together to do good. They understand the feeling of how good that is. And at the same time, there are, you know, another 13 foundations within the Walton ecosystem right now, you know, because individual families have their own foundations. And that's okay too. And so we have individual philanthropy, we have collective philanthropy, which is the family foundation, and we have collaborative foundation, which is this family member and that family member come together around a project. And so trying to say to the next generation, what are you interested in? Whether we fund it or not. So actually today I had some next geners visiting a school in New York that we don't fund just to see the difference between two schools. That's all they did today. Okay, and another group of next geners are going on an environment trip up to Governor's Island to see an oyster project that we don't fund. But they happen to all be going to college in New York, so that's where we're taking them. You know, so it's not about look at us, aren't we great, look what we do. It's can I get you excited about something enough to be passionate enough to want to serve.
I'm not sure that you, what you said stimulates me to suggest that you may want to talk to Steve Tobin. Do you know Steve?
I don't know, Steve.
He is the president of the foundation, the smaller foundation that the Hewlett Foundation created just for members of the family, and fosters exactly the sort of thing that you're talking about. They've been doing it now. What's the name of the foundation?
Floor Family.
Floor Family Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And they have been doing this. So now he's been running it for 20 years.
Great.
Like that.
Great.
They've gone through. It's really very interesting. He spoke here so ago.
Terrific. Thank you. I will do that.
Okay. Sophia.
My question is a follow-up, actually, to Ryan's question. I had been thinking about the same thing as well. You know, about part of it is how the next generation, the third and the fourths, are curious, but also about how they're influencing, about how they're exerting power, right, and how they're thinking about where they want to go, right. So there's this ecosystem of foundations, and you think about everything from the, I would say, I don't want to, most progressive or most innovative, like James and Wend, right? Something that's really different, a very different kind of outlook, right? And then I'm sure you have something on the other end that's even more traditional, right?
We do.
I believe it. And I'm curious about how this microcosm of diversity within the foundation has influenced your conversations about collaboration and how it plays out internally, but also how the younger generation is actually influencing the way is what the waterfall upwards looks like, and if there is one, and the way that you're working to design their future, but they're also, I'm sure, thinking about how they want to design collectively. And I'm just curious about what that interplay looks like.
First of all, it's a great question because there's been a series of opportunities for the family to come together and set some rules for how they work, not what they do. And that's, I think, the second piece of advice I would give to anybody starting a foundation now is to think about the how, not just the what. So, for example, we have a ground rule. When you don't agree, approach it with curiosity, ask a question, don't tell me I'm wrong. Okay? It changes the tonality of a conversation, though, at a table of 27 decision makers, when I can say to you, could you tell me more about why you think that? I'm having trouble understanding it. Is very different than I think you're wrong. So that's one. Two, you have to come together freely. That's written into all of our language. It's freely. No one is bound and has to show up. And so you're there because you want to be, you're there because you care, and you're there because you value bringing the family together. Again, we keep coming back to that. So there are times, I think, that I can honestly say where there has been controversy. The K-12 team wants to support an organization in Texas that's critical to getting some education legislation passed that has refused to acknowledge climate change. Do you let them do it or don't you? So you got to go back to the family and say, what do you want to do? You know, I laughed at the beginning when I said it was easier to work for, 190 nations at the UN, because this is something that is near and dear, and this is passion. This is not politics. And so you really need to spend the time as a foundation director building the relationships with the family that allow you to have difficult conversations. And sometimes I do that well, and sometimes I don't. I mean, believe me, they've gotten mad at me over the 3 years too, but the conversation is more important than the grant. Because at the end of the day, when they walk out of the room, they're still a family, whether they fund it or not. And I think for me, that was the piece I didn't think about before I took this job. And the other piece I didn't think about is that the meeting never ends, because then they go to Thanksgiving dinner and they say, well, we voted on that, but maybe we want to change our mind, and they call you the next day over turkey and say, we changed our mind. We're going to renege on that. But, but it's a family. I cannot imagine getting together with 27 of my relatives to decide how to spend $600 million. Yeah, right. Yeah, I just can't. I think about my cousins. Our politics are so diverse, and it was really easy for the first generation. It was Sam and Helen, and then it was really easy for the second generation because they were sitting at Sam and Helen's dinner table, and there was only 4 of them. But now there's 27, and soon, another 10 years or so, that's going to almost double. So they have just spent a year really looking at governance, looking at delegation of authority. And so the 27 set the strategy, the 5 set the yearly annual plan. So the 5 can't kill a program, and they can't add a program without the 27. But the 5 can decide, okay, now that we've decided we're focusing on rivers and ocean, which rivers, which oceans? That goes back to the 5, because otherwise it was like you spend more time making a decision than getting anything done.
Carol, thank you very much for being with us. And Joel, thank you for your leadership in bringing all of us together. One of the things that I've seen, and one of my responsibilities was heading up the GTE and Verizon Foundations in the Southeast. I was around when Governor Hunt did the, Head Start. And then we were leading, and then we've kind of slipped. One of the challenges we have as a region, especially in Durham, is we have a significant percentage of our population in poverty. And our families in poverty have young children. Mm-hmm. And there's been a real unfortunate disconnect with young childhood development, young parents, and K-12. We have pre-K slots in our schools, but the organizational chart has pre-K and K and just reporting up differently. The lack of seamless transition isn't there. I guess I'm interested in some of the things that you've seen. You know, it's interesting. You refer to it as K-12. I'm an old guy. When I grew up, it was 112, 1K. But now, maybe from a public policy standpoint, maybe it needs to be pre-K-12. But anyway, I'm interested in your thoughts on that.
You know, it's an interesting question because I will tell you the best pre-K program I ever saw was actually in Ethiopia. And it was in the northern part of the country where not everybody even goes to school. And the recognition that for many of the tribal kids, they were never in a situation before they went to school where they ever had to sit for 20 minutes straight. Okay, they were out of the hut in the morning and come back at the end of the day. So you had to start with teaching them to focus. And how do you do that? And how do you do that in a country that didn't have the dollars with which to implement a Head Start program? So they went to the kids who were 12 and 13 who had managed to stay in school and made it an honor to serve as a peer trainer to the little kids. It was an honor to be selected. They made it really, compete for the spot. And they were given a bag, little cloth bag, and in the cloth bag they were given 10 rocks of different colors, and their job was an hour at a time every day to spend with 3 kids in a hut to get them to focus for 1 hour and to teach colors and to teach numbers using 10 rocks. Cost about 80 cents a kid, and it was the most successful pre-K program I've ever seen. Those kids that went through that program went to school, got a hunger for learning, and they succeeded. They were able to stay in school and focus. I think sometimes we overthink our pre-K, and we forget that kids are kids. And, I can't say that I've seen the solution. I don't have an answer to say, here's the program. I do know that what I've seen this past year that has influenced our thinking, I have seen a school system in the city of Indianapolis put in place a psychosocial report of each kid so that teachers actually are assessing the state of children and recognizing that that's important. We require them to have physicals before they start kindergarten because we recognize we want them to be healthy enough to go to school. Well, their mental health is part of their health. So they're eliminating the stigma of mental health, and they're making sure kids get the support that they want. One of the most impressive programs I've seen. I saw a district up in Minnesota where one teacher recognized during the COVID pandemic, when kids do homework, they like to have an adult in the room, little kids. Big kids don't want you there, but little kids. And so she said, I will be the adult in your room. So she said, turn on your computer. I'll just sit in the room with you. And her kids performed better on the tests than any other class in the school. Now they all have hours of doing homework with their students. There's so much of this as easy fixes that are not as intricate as we think they have to be. But I do think it's sitting and talking, as I said, to the parents and saying, what do you believe your child needs? And actually listening to them. Because oftentimes, many of us are parents in this room. I have 3 sons. Thankfully, they're all grown up. But they were 3 really different learners with 3 entirely different sets of needs. You've got the kid who you got to punish and the kid you have to reward. You have the kid who can do all of his homework right after school, and that kid who, if he doesn't go run around right after school, he's never getting his homework done, And recognizing that, I put my kids in the United Nations school when I went to work for the UN, and they had recess as first period. I had never seen that before. I thought, this is insane. Why do I have to get this kid here at 8 o'clock to run around? But the reality was they ran around, and then they were ready to learn. So I just think there are things that we could be doing that aren't as major shifts as some of us think. We need to be willing to take a step back and reimagine school. That's really what the answer is.
I have a question about leadership and tenure, because this is okay. Is that about a little bit better, Joel? I have a question about leadership and tenure. This is a relatively short tenure relative to your previous positions at ADL and UNICEF, and how does that short, condensed period of time when you're dealing with huge challenges, how has that changed how you've led or impacted your leadership, knowing that you just had this very short period of time to do a lot of important work?
I committed to 3 to 5 when I came. I said to them, look, I'm 62. When I think I won't stop working, and I'm not intending to stop working, but I would like to have my schedule be my decision, not somebody else's for a while, after, almost 47 years of work. So now going in, I knew I had a finite deadline, and I had specific goals to achieve. So that made it easy to plan towards a finite deadline with goals. And by the time I leave, it'll be 4 of the 3 to 5. So it was kind of what I expected. I had the privilege at UNICEF to have a board that really backed me. And I came in and I did some serious house cleaning when I got there. I had been teaching a course in a graduate and an MBA program called Leadership in Teams. And I took my textbook and said, we're going to create a work team. I'm not going to sit at the top of it. I'm going to be a member of it. But I need my board to back me to hire the brightest and the best. We are saving the lives of children. So we're going to pay it at a P75, not at a P50. And we're going to invest in the training, and we're going to make it so you feel so fantastic that you work here, that you never want to leave. And I hired a power team. I mean, really a phenomenally powerful team. And they took a $200 million organization to $600 million during the downturn in the economies when all charities were closing their doors. And it was really that team that did it. It was the spirit of the team, and it was the talent of the team. So when I came to the Waltons, part of the commitment in taking the job was the ability to do the same thing. I actually stole my chief of staff from UNICEF and brought her with me, and she is the deputy director of the foundation. But we hired a really high-powered team. They don't need me. My environment director is truly the best environment director I could ask for. My K-12 director is the best K-12 director I could ask for. My home region guy has more history and community development work than I could ever have. So they don't need me to teach them how to do their jobs. My job was to just make them a team and get them to the point where they don't need me anymore. They don't need me anymore. Exactly. When it's time to kick them out of the house, right?
Thank you so much for coming. It's been a fabulous discussion. So I wanted to ask about the compromise and nuance you had mentioned, because that's very important to me, being able to actually listen to people you disagree with. So I have 2 sub questions on that. One, how do you build that compromise and nuance into human-centered design? Because it seems to me you're really good at designing the programs to their needs. And then when was one time in your career that you've learned something from someone you've greatly disagreed with? Thank you.
Well, you have to start with the fact that my husband and I are at opposite political spectrums. So I think every night at the dinner time, I'm asked to exercise those skills. But I think the way you build it is we did conflict resolution training for a long time in our schools, and then we kind of stopped doing that. And I really think we do need to put it back. I watched, as I said to you earlier, the difference in our board meetings when we committed to curiosity as opposed to opposition. There are skills, and we're trying to do the research to really get better at it and to figure out what the other skills are. But they take practice like anything else. You don't make the basket the first time you shoot, so it takes practice. And I don't think we give our children in our schools today ample opportunity to stretch that muscle and develop the skill. So much of it is just the learning design is not there. So I think that's the critical important step. And again, we're at the beginning of this journey. So I don't want to propose to you that, I have all the answers, because I don't. I don't know if that helps.
Yes, so this question comes from Ann Christensen, and she was asking, how do you and the foundation think about measuring role and impact of thought leadership work versus direct service programs and organizations?
We are heavily invested in thought leadership. We are. We really do believe in, first of all, strategic philanthropy. We believe it takes time to know if something works or doesn't work. So we try to make long-term commitments as opposed to short-term commitments. And that means that you have to have thought leadership alongside of it, because if you don't, you can't interpret your data. We do have what a lot of foundations do not have. We have our own strategy, learning, and education department that we actually stole somebody from Hewlett. That's why I wrote down Steve's name. So that we do, everything we do is evaluated. Everything we do gets assessed. We do not give any grant that doesn't have assessment tied to it. And we are doing more convening than anything else right now, truly just for the spirit of thought leadership. I mean, that is, and also trying to step outside our sector. I think the pandemic really taught us the best solutions came out of joint sector opportunities. Ford said, I can make PPE, but I don't have the money to convert the factory. So philanthropy stepped in. But even if I make PPE, I got to get the government to change some regulations or I'm not going to be able to make PPE. So the government stepped in. And then I need a distribution system. So government, will you fund that? Yes. Okay, nonprofits, will you be that? Yes. So there's a loop there. And I think, again, most of us have worked in single sector. And I think thought leadership is similar. Like, you have to put diverse ideas at the table. I'll tell just a really quick story. When I was at UNICEF, when we had the earthquake in Haiti, and the storm in Puerto Rico. Wrong country, I apologize. Storm in Puerto Rico, I get a call, what are you going to do? Now, we have no UNICEF staff in Puerto Rico. It's not a developing nation. And it's part of the United States territory. So I have not a single staff person on the ground. And now I've got America saying, what are you going to do? So I looked at my staff and I said, all right, what are we going to do? And I started looking around who was doing something we could support because we didn't have the expertise. Our then governor had done what very few others had done. He actually flew down and asked the governor of Puerto Rico, what do you need? Instead of assuming what they needed. So I called him and I said, Governor, what'd you learn? Right? What are you doing? And he said, well, I've cleared space at JFK and I've got Homeland Security guarding that space so we can collect what they need and we can put it there. And he goes, and I have the New York State Attorney General on the ground in Puerto Rico vetting organizations that could be a distribution chain. And he said, but I have no idea how to raise the money to make all of it happen. He said, I have no way to get it from JFK to Puerto Rico. And he said, I'm not sure if we're asking the right questions of the organizations on the ground. He said, what do you got? I said, well, I know how to raise money. I said, UNICEF raised close to $600 million already that year. So we know how to raise money. And we know what they need because we have responded in the face of storms our entire careers. And I know where the stuff is so that you don't have to source it from 27 places. I know one-stop shopping, but that one-stop shopping is in Italy right now in a warehouse. And it will never clear customs in time to be useful to Puerto Rico. So I need you to get something changed. Get us some kind of stay that will lift the customs restriction, and I can get you the stuff from the warehouse in Italy. But I still didn't know how we were going to get it from Italy to the United States, from the United States to Puerto Rico. But on my board was the CEO of UPS. He had just joined the board that week. I called Jim. I said, I need you in New York. And I said, Jim, what do you got? And he said, interesting, Carol. He goes, I've got 500 drivers on the ground in Puerto Rico and 500 trucks. And we have fuel and nobody had fuel. They had fuel. And he said, so I've got your distribution. If you can, and he said, and I've got ships sitting in the New York harbor. I'll ship the stuff down for you. And he goes, and we'll use our planes to get it from Italy to New York. And he said, but the roads are not opened in Puerto Rico because of the storm. And I said, well, what do they need to open the roads? They need chainsaws. So I called Bernie Marcus and I said, does Home Depot want to give us chainsaws? Okay. So we put all that in place. Okay. And the drivers literally drove their trucks with chainsaws. They cut down trees. They kept on going, and we got the supplies from Italy to New York, from New York to Puerto Rico, from Puerto Rico, from the port, out to the nonprofits and distributed to the people before anyone else. But none of us could have done that alone. And none of us could have even known how to do it alone, never mind make it happen. It took putting the sectors together. And I think that's, again, the big change we need to see in philanthropy. We have to stop thinking we can do it alone. We can't. It's going to take government, nonprofits, and the corporate community coming together.
Great story. Inspiring. Who's next?
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of these stories. I think that's been one of the special parts of this talk. I particularly resonated with your story moving down to Bentonville as a Jewish man from the East Coast moving down to the Deep South. I also didn't know what to expect, although it sounded like, I think you said you own a truck now, so you did a remarkable job assimilating. But for me, what I witnessed is that the Walton Foundation, like, quite literally propped up many programs in education, and for me, it was in the Mississippi Delta, and sometimes even parts of school districts. And so I'm wondering if there's a legislative-facing arm of the foundation that pushes state and local legislatures to take part in the efforts that you guys do, or you guys use to bolster K-12 educational programs, like sharing data, sharing effective, methodology and pedagogical practices, things like that.
So obviously, as a 501c3, we don't cross the political lines. Let me preface my comment. The family office has a political arm. We do have, a political office with staff who are engaged in supporting candidates that the family believes support the things they believe in. And that crosses all party lines because they are very issues focused. And so, yes, obviously, we are heavily involved right now with stimulus dollar bills. One of the things we just set up in Arkansas are 19 offices across the state with one-stop shopping for small NGOs to come in and say, am I eligible for stimulus dollars? Help me fill out the application. If I take the dollars, what does it mean? What kind of audit do I need to have? Can you help me do that? So that we can get those stimulus dollars to the ones who need it most. So we're involved at that level heavily.
Thank you so much. I appreciated your story on kind of the environmental work you've done at the Colorado River. Being from Wyoming, I will say, we don't have the Colorado River in Wyoming. I know that geography well enough, but I can tell you the temperaments of the kinds of people that I grew up with who were temperamentally allergic to anything that even seemed like people telling them what to do leads me to imagine that having a big philanthropy come in and try to tell farmers to change their practices might have been very culturally challenging, to put it mildly. I'm curious if you could just elaborate a little bit more on what your experience was like in trying to build trusting relationships with people that might come in with those pre-existing biases, and if you see any model for philanthropy going forward to be a convener or ways that philanthropy can build trust with the local communities that will ultimately need to be the ones implementing things like regenerative agricultural practices.
So again, we don't come in and tell them what to do. We come in at the table to hear why they, we'll share what we believe is a good practice. And then we want to hear why that doesn't work for you. And can we help to find a way where it could work for both of us? So different kind of conversation. We also, though, now have a group of farmers who talk to other farmers. Because I'm not a farmer. And as we all know, if you read the Edelman Trust Barometer, faith in philanthropy has gone down, not up. So, and I don't know, the first thing about yield. Okay, I don't. So I can't sit there and tell you yield isn't important. Yield is important. That's your livelihood. You're a fifth-generation farmer on this land, and I'm trying to tell you grow less crop. That doesn't work for you. So I've got to find other ways for other farmers to talk about what this will do to your crop and how you're going to lose that land eventually. And it's got to be a trusted source, so you're not going to buy it.
Okay, we're about out of time, so I don't think we have time for another question. I'm sorry about that, but nonetheless, very good questions. And thank you for all the very good questions. Before I thank Karen, I wanted to tell you about the coming sessions of this FIRG, Foundation Impact Research Group seminars. On February 15th, that's about 3 weeks from now, we have Rip Rapson coming, president of the Kresge Foundation. Those of you who have been here before know Rip, know that he is very entertaining, that he arrives with his own hand-drawn maps showing the interaction of programs with one another and with the state and the city, etc. Yeah, all the time, they're new drawings every time, so it'll be fun to watch. On February 22nd, a week later, we've got Mayor Justin Bibb from Cleveland, Mayor of Cleveland, who is one of the graduates of the Management Leadership for Tomorrow program created by John Rice. And he will be here. The session that day is going to be co-sponsored by Polis, and it will be downstairs in the Commons rather than up here. On March the 8th, Ginny Esposito, who is really the founder of Family Foundation work in the United States. She started the organization now called, I can't remember what it was, Center for Family Philanthropy, something like that, which works with all family foundations, their trustees, and their important directors. On March the 29th, a couple of weeks after the Ginny Esposito one, John Palfrey, who is the new president of the MacArthur Foundation, will be here. Now, he's, again, someone who's come into philanthropy from having been the head of a private school, and is a very different experience, actually. And then finally, on April the 18th, we're going to have Barbara Pickauer, who is the head of the JPB Foundation. She's been here before, too, a really amazing foundation president who's leading the way a number of major initiatives nationally that I think you'll find interesting. So that's the end of through the semester, the programs. We hope you'll come back. We hope that you will enjoy them at least as much as we've enjoyed this one. And I want to thank Karen for being here and for giving us your time. And I hope you have a safe trip to the 94th birthday party of your mother.